So let's talk about the planetary powers. I'm going to start with the moon, since it traditionally starts the order of the alchemical planets. The moon is traditionally associated with silver in alchemy, and this association with silver brings with it several things that can already teach you about the moon. First of all, silver is obviously the color of its name. Um, it is one of the substances that people seek out when it comes to very nice mirrors. A polished, well made silver mirror is one of the best mirrors that you can get, and of course, it's highly valued for magic and scrying. Now, the thing about a silver mirror is that it can easily tarnish. And of course, it doesn't clean away if you try to clean the glass on front. You'll have to. I don't really know how you clean a tarnished silver mirror. I don't know if polishing the silver on the back will help any. Um, but that is the risk that you run with reflecting in the moon is that you take in its shadows as well as its reflective parts. The moonlight is always going to color the scene in a certain way. It's going to mute the colors. It's going to create its own sort of blue fog over the land. And of course, the moonlight, even at a full moon, is not enough to light the countryside like the sun can. And it's not enough to grow all of the plants. That's why during the period of the year when there's less sunlight, we have a winter. Good time to go dormant. So the moonlight, it is good for reflecting in. It is good for dreaming in. Obviously, we spend a lot of time in the moonlight whenever we're sleeping. Um, During the daytime, it's a bit hard to focus on the moon because the sun is out. And of course, that would be daydreaming, which you're not supposed to do. Um, so the dreams that you get from the moon are typically prophetic or they help you see somewhere else. So it's definitely a scrying mirror. And the moon's kind of the Earth's twin. So what we get from the moon, I think, is really more purpose made to scry for Earth than, say, a planet like Jupiter or Mars, where it's going to be much more colored by their hues. The moon is, even if you look at it from space, it is a bunch of neutral colors. Um, it's just a highly volcanic landscape that's largely made of muted browns, greens, purples, rusts, but just predominantly gray whenever you look at it from a distance. Maybe a bit purpley or green. Um, and silver. Silver has that sort of ethereal color to it of maybe bluish, maybe purple. Um, can get sort of antique silver, so it looks more golden. Um, what color really is it? So that gives you some of the nature of the moon. The moon is very reflective. The moon will often turn to the past, or it will shine a mirror onto what it is that you see around you. It's there to be kind of your twin sibling who gives their insight into what it is that you're talking about when it comes to your life. That twin sibling knows you because it grew up with you, and the moon has always been here with us. Rotating around the Earth as the Earth rotates around the sun. The moon's always been there. Um, so it's kind of aware of your whole history. It's been here for you in a way that the distant planets haven't been able to because it's been right there, able to kind of see you. So the moon is very personal, I find. It's very easy to get lost in the consciousness of the moon or the experience of the moon because it can be so personal. And that reflection, of course, reflects to our own pasts, our own subconscious. So it's easy to get lost in those personal connections instead of what the moon is actually trying to tell you. One of the keys to focus on is that the moon will teach you through memory and talk to you through your own memories. So instead of trying to think, how could the moon possibly know this about me, and why would the moon possibly be about this incident in my life? It's millions of years old. That can't be right. Instead, think of it as the moon is casting a lens onto my life and reflecting to me what it knows about me so that it can communicate something vital that it wants to tell me. And sometimes it can be about something completely different than what you would assume the memory it's pointing to is about. Sometimes the memory can accidentally be traumatic, because associations to traumatic memories are often stronger than associations to less extreme memories. So if that repeatedly happens, you may just want to talk to the moon, just very clearly, just speak to it whenever no one else is around if that's what you need, and say, I can't handle references to this set of memories, and that's what this is bringing up. Is there a different way that you want to communicate what it is that you're trying to tell me? I could use other symbols than what it is that you're sending me. And that is probably going to be enough to change things. If that doesn't change things, then it's quite possible that the moon is trying to help you reflect on this thing that's very difficult for you to think about. What can be frustrating about planetary consciousnesses is that they seem to think it's time to do things when you don't, and that's because they're thinking from a macro point of view. From their perspective, it's time for everyone to do this thing. From your perspective, it's not time for you to do this thing in particular because your life is like this. And so the planetary consciousnesses and the planetary forces, they exhibit themselves in people's lives the same way that weather exhibits itself. Everyone experiences the storm. Everyone gets wet when it rains. So the planetary consciousnesses want to tell us about these things, these big things. When it comes to the smaller things, they can also help with the smaller things. They can help with pretty much everything. But they know that they're so big that they're going to see things that are big way more than we're going to see things that are big. We're going to see things that are down in the girth very small, and we could tell them about that, and they can give us advice from there. We lend them our small perspective. They can look at things on the micro level, or at least on the kind of medium level. The micro level would be, subatomic. They look at things on our medium ground level, and they can give us lots of advice from there, but they really want to tell us about these big things because they're seeing things on a planetary scale, and they want to share these observations. They want to share what it is that only the planets can tell us certain things, and so they want to tell us these things. That means sometimes letting go of what's going on in the present moment and saying, hey, I know that I focus on these issues all the time. I care about politics. I care about the environment. I care about literacy. I care about whether people are having emotional issues and whether people are suffering in the world. But I'm going to put aside all the things that I care about for just a moment. And when I do that, when I give you this space, I want to see if there's anything that you want to communicate to me that is beyond those concerns. I'm going to let go of all my attachments to all the things that I like and my favorite things and the things that I expect and the things that I think I'm prepared for, and just put those aside for a moment. Because I know that the planet is not going to try to scare me, and it's very likely to not trigger me. So I'm going to put all of that aside, trust that the planet wants to show me something that's very important and that only it can show me and that it wants to show me. And then say, what is it that you want to show me that I wouldn't know and I wouldn't even know to expect? I'm ready to hear the things that it was hard for me to be ready for before. Going and approaching the planets from that angle helps them understand that you're ready to listen to them on a new scale, on a new order of being, and that you're also not going to take it personally if what they tell you is not really within the concerns that you're most pressed by right now. If they're going to communicate to things to you about the orbits of the planets instead of the orbits of your life. This is why it's good to communicate with them. I would like to set aside time for this, to talk about things on this scale. Could we set aside time for that? And then later, I'd like to dial things back to my scale, please, again, so that I can bring this to an understanding of my own life. And that way, you can learn it at the macro scale and then zoom back down to your scale and talk to it again when it comes to the order of your own life. Instead of constantly trying to relate the macro scale back to your life immediately yourself. Basically, take in the macro. Just learn and understand the perspective of the macro. Learn and understand that other perspective first. Don't bother paralleling it to your own perspective. Take that other perspective, put it in a jar. And meanwhile, the cat is being very rude. Now, take that perspective and put it in a jar. Look for the jazz cigarette. Now come to this new perspective where it's just about the planetary stuff. The perspective that the planets probably experience themselves. And just learn things from that perspective. Give them a stage to play and teach on and perform on. And let them convey the message that they want to convey. And once they are done conveying that, just take that in as their own expression, their own creative expression, and then start thinking what it is that you think about that, because what you think about that is your reaction to it. But you'll need to put aside your reactions until after you experience this. That's going to be the most difficult part. You're not supposed to be taking this in as, here's everything that I think about this and how safe it is and what it is that I should think according to so-and-so belief system, and whether or not it is what a Democrat would agree with, or a liberal would agree with, or a hippie or whatever. Instead of evaluating this for everyone else, instead of evaluating it all, just stick it in storage. And that's the hardest part. The thing is, you're not dealing with a movie, a DVD, a YouTube video, someone's political spiel or whatever. You're dealing with a transmission from a planetary consciousness, and most of all, you're dealing with something that's coming from within your own brain. So there's a certain degree to which you're just going to have to trust that the universe has something to say to you. To receive that message, you just need to receive the message, put it into an empty can somewhere in your brain, and then later on put that can on playback. And if you want to pause the can, pause the can. Call it a film canister, as it were. If you want to play back the canister, you can. If you want to repeat it, if you want to make it go slow, fast, whatever. But basically, record the thing on a record of some sort in your brain. Put that aside on a shelf. play it back whenever you want. It's yours, basically. And instead of thinking about it as a memory that is woven into your experience and you have to call up your experience and associate this memory at a given point, it's not really a part of your experience. It's someone else sending a message. So just take that message and actually record it somewhere on media inside the imagination of your brain. Put that aside. Play it back later. In this way, you can keep it from associating with any sort of already existing memories in your own brain. You don't want to be weaving it in from what you've got already in your hardware. It's going to be really annoying to deal with that way. So this is going to be a new way of thinking, a new way of taking in information. And it's going to be different than, say, hypnosis, where you're supposed to be taking it into a subconscious level and just doing whatever it is that they say. It's not about you don't approach this with a level of suggestibility. You just approach this with a level of, I am taking this in exactly as it is coming in, and I am making a note of it, and I am putting that note somewhere to be accessed later. And until it's accessed, it's not a thing. It's like putting it in a lockbox or something. That doesn't get to be triggered as a memory because it wasn't a memory. It's not an experience. Memories come from experiences, but if you're receiving a transmission like this, the transmission itself is not an experience. The creation of the record of the transmission can be an experience, but the message itself has to be interpreted out of the creation later. So that means that the message itself isn't actually in your brain constantly firing and tangling up with your memories. It can't, because the message has to be interpreted out of the transmission, and the transmission is what's actually in your brain. So I have kind of wandered far afield. Sorry about that. Apparently that was very important for you to hear. Anyway, I'm going to close this out. Good night.